Thank you very much indeed. Well, we've got some more detailed questions, you might imagine. I'm going to start with James Davis and then Chris Clarkson.
Thank you, Chair. So my first question really is, from your perspective, where do you think the UK stands in terms of quantum computing currently? Gerald Mullally first.
Yeah, I think the UK has done an incredibly good job of building a very vibrant ecosystem on quantum computing. We have, second only to the US, more startups in quantum computing. We've attracted an enormous amount of private capital, again, I think only second to the US, which is really impressive. On that basis, I think we are respected around the world, and when we travel around the world and we engage with other governments, but in addition customers in other countries, I think being a British quantum computing company is definitely an asset for us. I think the next stage is really in terms of how we then scale that, how we move from a really vibrant startup ecosystem to one where we ensure we have unicorns that are global leaders in quantum computing in the future. And I think as part of this discussion, I think that scaling challenge and what we need to do from a scaling point of view will be kind of key.
Yes, I completely agree. I think the first decade of the UK Quantum Technology Programme rightly focused on solving some of the fundamental science questions. You know, 10 years ago, the question was, could you build a qubit at all? And if so, what sorts of physics should you be using? That's a big research question. I think the world tried many different ideas, and out of that has emerged perhaps 5 different approaches that all look extremely promising. I think the benefit of the last 10 years has been essentially a Moore's law scaling in quantum computing. So every 12 to 18 months, the quality of the underlying qubits has doubled. And that's tremendous progress. The ability to control quantum bits and electrons and photons at that precision is really remarkable. And I completely agree with Gerald. Like, the challenge now is to scale this up and to create hundreds of trillions of dollars or pounds of economic benefit in the UK, create massive companies here. This is another wave of technology, and we should be at the forefront of that.
Yes. Dr. Carmen in California, you would agree with the comments made?
Yes, I do. So I think historically the UK has developed world-class quantum science, and the first quantum program was successful in turning that into good technology and spin-out. So today we have a quantum ecosystem where we have at least one high-quality company in each part of the kind of quantum computing stack, and representing at least one each kind of qubit approach. Okay. And that's really remarkable. I think I agree that the startups are respected worldwide, and I would add that it's a collaborative ecosystem, and it's coherent. It's managing to bring in end users as well. And I think that now we have good signs that it will continue thanks to the quantum missions, the NQCC that retains that coherence for the ecosystem to be able to develop with a clear roadmap.
Good, thank you. So clearly already much success, but are there areas that you think the UK government should focus on in terms of quantum computing to build on that success? Again, Dr. Carmen.
I agree with what has been said about scale.
Yeah.
We need to ensure that these companies are able to be successful, and that will require large amounts of capital, both public and private, and that we can play on a global market. And so beyond capital to scale, it's the ability to bring in capital from abroad, be able to engage with suppliers and customers outside of the UK, and for that to be part of the UK strategy for our startups to continue to be top of the list globally.
Okay. And our two guests in person, are there any comments you'd like to add to that in terms of the specific areas of quantum computing that this country should focus on?
Yeah, so I think we're all agreeing that the challenge is to scale a great company. So how do you do that? And I think the answer is actually quite simple. I think the government should buy stuff. And it should buy things on the time scale that's relevant to startups. There's no point having a 5-year procurement process. We'll be dead by then. So I think the key thing is for the government to act as an intelligent customer. You've seen that in many industries be hugely successful. The semiconductor industry was really kick-started by procurement from NASA. Right? So Moore's Law, we mentioned this earlier, but it was those 4 data points, 95% of that market was from procurement from NASA for the Apollo program. So I think the same model would work here in quantum. There's a huge return on investment for a government to act as an early customer. I think there's no point buying quantum computers in 5-10 years' time when they're already commercially available. You won't really be impacting or creating a market. So I think that is a challenging thing to do. Being an intelligent customer requires expertise on both sides of the discussion, but it is certainly achievable. We're starting to see it already. So the APCC's procurement of small testbed systems, I think that's a great idea. These are small. The next stage needs to be much bigger. And I think that will drive both innovation. It will make it happen in the UK. It will attract companies and talent to the UK. And it will attract capital to the UK. Because if I can say to my investors, hey, I've got 10 million in revenue next year, guess what? They're much more interested in investing in a company.
Are there any other state interventions that we need to mention that could be useful?
I think building on Steve's point, it's probably breaks down into 3 areas. One is in terms of access to markets, which I think Steve has covered really well in terms of the customer and the government role for that. Access to people, which is the talent side. And then the last one is access to finance. And I think when we look at finance, and obviously from a quantum computing perspective, we're one part of the deep tech ecosystem. And I think the stats that come out of the broader ecosystem apply to quantum computing. About 50% of companies do not exist between Series A and Series B in terms of deep tech. There's 15% higher survive in the US. And going through 6 rounds of funding, we are 6 times less well-funded than companies in the US. And when you adjust for GDP, we're less funded than the US, Sweden, China, and Israel. And I think that has a knock-on impact on everything we do from infrastructure, which I think we'll come back to as a really important point about whether we can build our own. But it also means in terms of the attraction of funding from other locations. And what we're seeing from other governments is the development of funds, effectively, that either direct investment into quantum computing companies at certain series, stage, Series B, as an example, or they're investing in other funds, and those VCs are then the ones that are investing in the companies. I think we've done some of that here, but the scale, and it probably goes to a scale point, is probably not what we're seeing in other countries at this point.
Dr. Brierley, I'm going to repeat a quote from you regarding quantum computers, in that the short-term hype is a bit high, but the long-term hype is nowhere near enough. Why is that the case?
Yeah, so that's because the current quantum computers we have are not as good as your laptop or mobile phone. And that's because errors overwhelm the computation. We haven't yet built the scale of the quantum computer needed and included quantum error correction in that. So if people are talking about, hey, I've got some quantum advantage today, they're overhyping the technology at this point. I think in where we are underestimating the impact of quantum computing is in the transformational nature of this new type of computer. So for me, that really means the ability to simulate perfectly how molecules and electrons and the physics of the very small. And this has a transformational capability across multiple different sectors. So in an industry such as aerospace, we have 2 things, right? So we have the equations which can which tell us what will happen in the system, and we have computers that can solve those equations. And with these two ingredients, the sector designs aeroplanes. It doesn't discover flight, it doesn't discover the next generation. It uses computers for design. Whereas in areas such as pharmaceuticals, in drug discovery, or in materials design, or in the search for a new catalyst for, say, carbon capture or some other industrial process, we have the equations of motion. Right? These are called quantum mechanics, they're now 100 years old. But we still don't have the computers that can solve those equations. And so I think that's why we still talk about drug discovery, and we still talk about the discovery of a new material or the discovery of a new industrial process. And so what I think the potential of quantum computing is to radically change how those entire sectors develop new products. So that's why I believe this will be a hugely transformational technology. And I think that understanding that change in how whole sectors and things are developed is hard to comprehend at this point.
Very exciting. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much indeed. Chris Clarkson, then Dawn Butler.